All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome back. But today is July 13th. A lot of other things happen on this date, including today is Julius Caesar's birthday. Yay! Um, Happy birthday to Julius Caesar, who was born on this date in 100. And again, as far as you know, he didn't register his birth with the internet at the time. So, but 100 BC, and of course, he died on March 15th, the Ides of March, in 44 BC. The other thing today, in 1787, the Northwest Ordinance was passed. Okay, so there's a couple of interesting things in the U.S. Okay, a couple of interesting things about the Northwest Ordinance. It's like the only thing passed by what was called the Articles of Confederation, the government under the Articles of Confederation. You know, the U.S. became the U.S. in 1776, but the Constitution wasn't passed until 1787. So there's like an 11-year difference there. So in that meantime, we had the Articles of Confederation. And so the 1787 Northwest Territory, or the Northwest Ordinance, which arranged and organized this area where we live today. We were the Northwest Territory, Illinois. And so if you ask yourself, why do we have townships? Okay, why do we have townships? Because in 1787, the people thought, okay, this is how they're going to govern the area. In 1793, Jean-Paul Marat, French revolutionary, was killed in his bathtub by a woman, I've forgotten her, Claudia Colbert, something with a C. Some of you may have seen the very famous painting of a guy dead in the bathtub. That's Marat. I think he's more famous for just the painting than that. And so we don't know what Marat did, but we know there's a painting of him dead in the bathtub. It's like, how many of you remember your childhood based on pictures you remember? Like, I don't remember doing that, but I know there's a picture of me doing that when I was a kid. It's also John Jacob Astor's the fourth's birthday. Okay, John Jacob Astor the fourth, born in this state in 1864, from the Astor family. You know, so if you're like the Waldorf Astoria Hotel, kind of the Astor family, the richest family. Does anybody know when he died? Titanic? He died on the Titanic. He was the richest person to die on the Titanic. Um, so I know it's kind of how did a rich person manage to not get off the Titanic? Because a lot of others people managed to get off the Titanic, but not him. Where were you on this date in 1985? Does anybody remember? Yeah, you just aren't going to admit because you know where you were. Charlie knows where he was. Okay, that's good. That's good. Today is the day that Live Aid happened. Remember Live Aid, the concert in London and in Philadelphia. It was all that, and I know you guys don't want to admit. So, a few weeks ago, you remember. So David is the king in Israel. He's the king in Jerusalem, and he's got multiple sons. And he's got a son named Amnon who is in love. I use the word loosely, with his sister Tamar, and he rapes her and apparently gets away with it until 2 years later, when Tamar's full brother Absalom, who is David's third son, arranges a hit, how else to put it, and kills Amnon. Absalom is then sent to his hometown, his home country, or not his home country, but his mother's home country of Geshur. He's the grandson of the king of Geshur, and so he spends 3 years there until Joab, his David's nephew, David's nephew, arranges for Absalom to come back. Now, Absalom is now, by as far as just figuring it out, is the crown prince, because Amnon was the oldest, and the second child would be the child of Abigail, and he disappears. We don't hear about him at all. So it's just speculation. He died, or he has become the Levirate child and has taken over the affairs of Nabal. And so Absalom is the next in line. So he is the not the prime minister. He is the he's like the Prince of Wales. He is the crown prince. He is next in line to be king, and he's brought back, and yet David won't see him. And so David, for 2 years, then Absalom is out there, and there's a message, or there's a message. There's a short passage where Absalom is described to us as being a very handsome, head to toe, no blemish in him, which is a lot like how we describe our other son. I'm kidding. Our son Silas, here, and with glorious hair that he only cuts once a year, kind of thing. And so he's a very handsome guy. Yeah. Yeah. I'm just going to move on. And so Absalom has come back, and he hasn't seen the king for 2 days or 2 years. Excuse me, 2 years. And so he arranges he tries to get Joab's attention, and Joab won't pay attention to him. So he sends his men, and again, Absalom has some great guys working for him. I mean, commit a murder? Sure. Commit arson? Sure. I can do all of that stuff. And so they burn up Joab's field, get Joab's attention. And next thing you know, Joab is suddenly, okay, what do you want? And so Joab works the rapprochement, I guess, between David and Absalom. And at the end of chapter 14, the last verse, we said, so Joab went to the king and told him this. That is all about how Absalom wants to see him, and no doubt he's pining for you and all of that. Then the king summoned Absalom, and he came in and bowed down with his face to the ground before the king, and the king kissed Absalom. Okay, and again, there's some discussion as far as what does that mean? Where it said the king kissed Absalom. Does that mean that he's happy to see him, or is this just an official thank you for coming back, or is this what does that mean? Okay, I don't know. We don't know. It's just that's it doesn't say David kissed Absalom. It doesn't say the father kissed the son. It says the king kissed Absalom, kind of thing. And the thing is, without getting too weird about it, this kissing was a more common thing in the day, where they do the French kiss on both cheeks or whatever. That it was a more common thing at this time than it is today. Yet another reason I am glad that we don't live in Bible times. But so at that point, so now David and David and Absalom have literally kissed and made up, so to speak. Absalom has essentially, in a sense, gotten away with the murder of Amnon, although there's a question maybe Amnon should have been punished. It's and it did cost Absalom 5 years, 3 years in Geshur, and then 2 years in internal exile, house arrest. I don't know what you want to call it, but so we're back. We've moved forward now. We're like 5 years later. Okay, so and then we have some more time. So in chapter 15 is where we'll start. Now, one other thing that just a reminder in the past, previously, David. Let's not forget, David had committed adultery with Bathsheba. And one of the interesting things about this is that she is the daughter of Eliam. We know this from chapter 11, verse 3, who was the son of Ahithophel the Gilonite. Okay, now we know this from a later passage in chapter 23. I just say that kind of because this guy's going to come back. I'm going to say, okay, who is this guy? So this guy Ahithophel is Bathsheba's grandfather, right? So he is one of David's counselors. And we talked about that when we talked about Bathsheba, that when David goes after Bathsheba, this is a woman who who's connected to a lot of people. Okay, so when David picks this woman to commit adultery with, it's not like he's just found someone who's a nobody. He's like, picking somebody who's well connected, kind of thing. So keep that in mind. He's coming back. In the course of time, chapter 15, beginning with verse 1, in the course of time, Absalom provided himself with a chariot and horses with 50 men to run ahead of him. Okay, So it says, in the course of time, again, this is a passage that came up again in earlier in chapter 13. Absalom gets a chariot and horses and 50 men to run against him. Now, we've heard about these before, and Samuel in 1 Samuel 8 prophesied that the king would take chariots and horses. But up until this point, only the enemy had had chariots and horses. Nobody in Israel had used chariots and horses. Now, they will in the future, but this is the first time we hear about him. And so Absalom has this chariot and 50 men to run in front of him. Again, Absalom's got some guys here. Part of the principal negotiations was like, okay, am I going to get a chariot and horses and 50 men? And they said no. So I'm like, well, okay, fine. But no chariot, no horses. I said yes anyway. But regardless, so he's got these 50 men running ahead of him. Let's see, he would get up early and stand by the side of the road leading to the city gate. Whenever anyone came with a complaint to be placed before the king for a decision, Absalom would call out to him, "What town are you from?" He would answer, "Your servant is from one of the tribes of Israel." Then Absalom would say to him, "Look, your claims are valid and proper, but there's no representative of the king to hear you." Okay. And Absalom would add, "If only I were appointed judge in the land." Now, who should be the judge? Who, in the way, as we know from the Old Testament, who normally is the judge? The king. David is the king, right? So who would be the judge? David. Okay. So Absalom is out there, and he's I just, it's an interesting way that he's working here. He said, "Oh, if only I were appointed judge, if I could do that whole judge role." And people would think, well, that's the king's job. So if you had the king's job, and how do you get the king's job? Well, you become the king. That's kind of the easiest way to do that. And Absalom would add, "If only I were appointed judge in the land, then everyone who has a complaint or case would come to me, and I would see that they receive justice." Now, this is like the greatest campaign speech ever. Okay, I mean, you've ever listened to a campaign? When I get to be president, everything's going to be fixed. This problem, it's going to be gone. Okay, first day, boom, everything fixed. Okay, within the first 100 days, it's going to be fixed. Within my first year, I will do this. And then the candidate gets into office, and lo and behold, what happens? And I'm not picking on any one particular, because it happens to all of them. It was a little more complicated than I thought. Not only is it not going to be solved on the first day, the 90th day, the 100th day, it's not going to be solved at all. Okay, and so you can go back through and read campaign speeches and what they promised, and he's like, so he says with 50 men running ahead of him, the only counselor in town, his good looks and fabulous hair. Okay, I did not fill in the A. Absalom, A is for Absalom, stands out. Okay, so he's there. He's got a chariot. He's amazingly good looking. There's 50 men around him, and people are walking in the city gate. They're going to come, and he's there. And what's your problem? What can I do? How can I help you today? Wow, this amazingly powerful looking, good looking guy. And we all know, because we all know who he is. Everybody knows who Absalom is. Okay, what can I do for you today? Oh, you can just kind of imagine the scene. Oh, my brother took this, or whatever the things are. Oh, I would love to help you. You have got a good point. So Absalom sets himself up on being very sympathetic or simpatico with the common man. I am just like with you. And he's got this thing. Somebody would come in, he would inquire their lineage. Where are you from? Okay. Now, this may be because he didn't want to waste his time with somebody who wasn't a voter. Okay. I don't know. But, where are you from? Where are you from? Okay. He would verify their concern. Your concerns are valid and proper. Okay. Is that what he says? Valid and proper? Yeah. Yeah. So, again, you could there's probably a lesson here. I mean, it would be It would be spiritualizing the text, I guess. Just how to deal with issues. Okay, do what Absalom does. Just don't. I don't. So he gets their information. He he validates their concern, so the people feel heard. Okay, that's an important thing. People need to be heard. You need to understand. This is true. I'm not making fun of it, but this is what he's doing. Right now, where's David? Right? How can David not know that his son is standing out there? Maybe David is sitting in the throne room thinking, "Man, it really is a slow day today. Nobody's coming in. Wonder why?" Or maybe he's just saying, "Good thing. Let's not ask too many questions. I'm just going to go in and figure everything is being taken care of. No problems today." Maybe David thinks everything's firing on all 8 cylinders. All right, finally got everything calmed down. Little does he know, David is or Absalom is out there. Okay, validating. He wanted to help. I really want to help. Okay, if only I were appointed judge. If only. I would love to help you. You have such a good point. You are so in need of help. If only I could do something for you, kind of thing. Uh, then everyone would receive justice. I mean, seriously, everyone would receive justice. Okay, so you think about this. When somebody comes to the king for justice, it's because he or she has been wronged by somebody else. Okay, there are not that many win-win solutions in the world. Okay, somebody's going to lose something, so somebody's going to be unhappy. Okay, you very rarely see two people walk out of civil court both happy. Okay, usually one person is upset. Okay, didn't get exactly what they want. When I was an insurance adjuster, that was one of my careers before becoming principal. Somebody described the task, the role of being an insurance adjuster is facilitating a conversation or a good conversation. A good facilitation results in both parties being unhappy. So it's like, okay, well, that's one way to look at it as an insurance adjuster, because like my car is totaled and I want $10,000 for it, so and the insurance company only wants to pay $6,000 for it, and so you say, well, we'll pay $8,000 for it. So the insurance company is unhappy because you paid too much, and the other person is unhappy because you paid too little, kind of thing. So that's the thought behind that. I don't know to what extent that is true. I was in a meeting once where somebody suggested they had all of the adjusters for Ford. One of the muckety mucks in the company, not one of the people in the actual insurance end of things, said we should really said that the insurance adjusters should really focus on making our customers happy. And the manager of the insurance division jumped right up and goes, "That would be really expensive," kind of thing. It's like, how much money does Ford have? So we don't know if we want to do that. But everyone would receive justice, right? And things are not firing on all 8 cylinders. David may not realize it because there are people coming to the gate, right? So Absalom is busy. Every day he's doing this. He's making this big procession. Every day he's out there doing this, okay? Then it says also, whenever anyone approached him to bow down before him, because again, he's the crown prince, right? I mean, if Prince William walked in the room today, Prince William, the crown prince of England, he's the Duke of something. What is he the Duke of? Prince of Wales. Prince of Wales, not the Duke of anything. He's the Prince of Wales. So if the Prince of Wales walked in, all of us, most of us, would be, not bowing to the guy, because again, we're Americans, we won, okay, but we'd be like, oh, okay, very nice. We'd be polite, most of us. Ed, perhaps, I don't know, but most of us would be polite and say, glad to meet you, kind of thing, and want to shake hands. But not, so everybody sees the crown prince. They know he's going to be the king someday. It's just a question of when. So of course, what do you do when you're in front of a king? You bow before the king, right? But no, because Absalom is just one of the common men. He said he would grab, would reach out his hand, take hold of him, and kiss him, kind of like David kissed Absalom. So there's these interesting throwbacks, and the construction there, it says when he would take hold of the people. Okay, it's the same word construction where he talked about Amnon grabs Tamar. So it's like, this is, they're not expecting this, and so he comes in. No, 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 no. Here, let me kiss you. Okay, so um, Abraham behaved in this way toward all the Israelites who came to the king asking for justice. And of course, the thing is, and this is what's so, pardon me? Did I? Well, Abraham did it too. No, Absalom. I'm sorry, Absalom. Absalom did this for years. So, and the genius of this is that nobody's getting justice, right? Does anybody notice that? Nobody's getting justice. Nobody's getting their problem solved. They're just getting this hope. He's selling them hope that, when I'm king, or if I were the judge, when I'm king, everything's going to be all right for you. And so all these people are going home, and they get in the house, and they sit down for dinner, and the wife says, "So how'd it go?" Well, good news and bad news. Bad news is I didn't really get a chance to see the king, but I did see Absalom. And man, is he going to fix things when he's in charge. And then they go out to church that night, or they go to dinner with their friends, and well, how was your day? Well, you know what? I didn't really get what I wanted today, but man, that guy Absalom, he's, have you ever met in any sort of scenario where maybe it's a political candidate, maybe it's a pastoral candidate, maybe it's a candidate for school board or something like this, and you're part of the choosing group, and you meet him or her, and you're really impressed. You think, man, I sure hope that person wins. I really want that person to win. And so this is the mood that Absalom is selling through the whole people of Israel. Okay, and is it any wonder that the text says, and so he stole the hearts of the people of Israel. He stole the hearts of the people of Israel. It's like nobody wants harm to come to David, but they're all looking forward to when Absalom becomes king. Yeah, we really want Absalom to be king. Yeah, David's okay, he's great, but the next guy, he's going to be great. And so Absalom is doing this. Why? Why is Absalom doing this? Okay, I mean, he's going to be king someday, right? He's the crown prince. Now, we don't know yet, but it's at when this happens. So it could be. We know at some point it's anointed that Solomon is going to be the king. Okay, so David says Solomon is going to be the king at some point. Now, it may already be something that is already known inside. It's inside information kind of thing. David wants Solomon to be the king. Okay, and so excuse me. So maybe he's kind of working against that. That would kind of give a motivation. But then again, there's been a lot of in history. There have been a lot of kings or crown princes that were more than willing to jump the gun, so to speak. Okay, to move on. And so he, excuse me, I'm sorry. We were just, and so he stole the hearts of the people of Israel doing this. Debbie and I just started listening to a podcast on the way up here. And it was talking about the 3.5% rule. Has anybody heard of the 3.5% rule? It's big on TikTok. I've heard there's a lot of TikTok. If you who here knows what, other than Silas and Charlie, anybody here knows what TikTok is? It's a, but it's a, but the 3.5% rule is based on a political scientist work. A woman named Erica Chenoweth, same last name as the actress. I don't know if there's any relation, but the 3.5% rule is a political science theory approach that says that for a revolution to work, any revolution that equals, and I've only started listening to this, so don't, 3.5% of the population is engaged in the opposition, or every political revolution where the opposition exceeds 3.5% of the population succeeds. So the idea is, in this particular podcast, is if you are against the current administration, how do we get against this current administration? Well, 3.5% of the population needs to get engaged in some way. Now, the trouble is it goes both ways. What if 3.5% of the, how did the last administration lose? Well, 3.5% of the population got engaged in some way. I mean, and the engagement goes beyond voting here. But here, Absalom, over the course of 4 years, is talking to people and is engaging the population in his favor. Okay, so in the end, about 4 years, Absalom steals the hearts of the people. Okay, so he's working this for 4 years. Okay, that's a lot of conversations. That's a lot of days standing outside the. So, what's David doing all this time? Why isn't David saying, "Hey, Absalom, don't you have anything better to do with your time?" How can David not know what's going on? Because you remember earlier when the woman of Tekoa, man, I'm sorry, it's something. When the woman of Tekoa comes, and one of the things she says, "Oh yes, David, you know everything that's going on." Okay, we've gone from somebody who people think knows everything that's going on, who apparently is clueless about what his son is doing. Okay, because he's got to know what's happening. Okay, but nothing is happening. Again, what have we said about David's ability with his family? Okay, like his ability to deal with. Oh, thank you. That's this neat little thing here to put. Yeah, but it's like it's too deep, kind of thing. So we've got at the end of 4 years, and so he stole the hearts of the people of Israel. At the end of 4 years, Absalom is going to make another request of the king. Absalom's going to come and he's going to make another request of the king. And remember the last request he made of the king? Hey, why don't you come with me? Okay, well, if you can't come with me to my little party, send Amnon. In the assumption there, he'll be safe, right? So it's David is like, okay, maybe he's thinking, fine, I'll get rid of him, get him out of town. I don't know. But he comes in and he says, at the end of 4 years, Absalom said to the king, "Let me go to Hebron and fulfill a vow I made to the Lord. While your servant was living at Geshur in Aram, I made this vow. If the Lord takes me back to Jerusalem, I will worship the Lord in Hebron." Okay, now where have we heard of Hebron before? Well, that's the town that David first went to, where David first was anointed king. Okay, so I've mentioned this before, that these place matters here, that he's going there for a reason. David started his kingdom in Hebron. Absalom is going to Hebron. Now, does this occur to David? Oh, Hebron, I know that place. Yeah, there's a restaurant right near where my palace used to be when I first became king. Good times there. Yeah, you'll love it there. I mean, I don't know what the conversation is like, but clearly Absalom knows why he's going to Hebron. I mean, why not go to Jericho? Why not go to Dan? Why not go to Beersheba? Why not go to any other city? No, let's go to Hebron. Okay, so again, it's like in Illinois, if you're going to announce for an election, Springfield is a good town for doing that. That's our capital. Okay, if you're going to go, LaGrange doesn't really ring a lot of bells. He picked LaGrange for its historical value, and we're all going, wait, what? LaGrange? What's LaGrange? But Springfield, okay, yeah, Springfield. Okay, or Vandalia, or Kaskaskia, for those of you who really know your Illinois history, because those were earlier capitals of Illinois. Okay, so he makes another request to go off somewhere. So again, compare 1324. This time to Hebron, the town where David was first anointed king. Okay, and he says, while your servant was living at Geshur in Aram, I made this vow: if the Lord takes me back to Jerusalem, I will worship the Lord in Hebron. Now, how long has he been in Jerusalem? 4 years. You know, the thought occurred to me, it's like, well, you've been back for 4 years. I mean, if you made a vow that you're going to be returned back, why did it take 4 years for you to decide to, that's just a kind of a question. Why isn't David asking this question? So the king said to him, go in peace. So he went to Hebron. Now, again, maybe David is thinking, get him out of my hair. Maybe David knows and he thinks, okay, he's not going to do me any damage in Hebron. Okay. Then go in peace. Then Absalom sent secret messengers throughout the tribes of Israel to say, as soon as you hear the sound of the trumpets, then say, Absalom is king in Hebron. So now the conspiracy is unmasked. Okay, these are secret, right? This is Absalom. So we know now why Absalom is going to Hebron. Okay, then he says, 200 men from Jerusalem had accompanied Absalom. They had been invited as guests and went quite innocently, knowing nothing about the matter. Okay, so one idea is like, who are these guys? Who are these 200 men that Absalom is bringing along? And some have suggested that it's part of the security detail, the administrative state. So that why is David suddenly like, why does David say, well, I got to flee? Well, because like 200 of his men are gone. Okay, 200 of his helpers, his officers, his administrators are gone. Okay, so he's kind of in a panic, right? Maybe these 200 men, and the text says they weren't quite in, they have no clue what's going on. Okay, but all of a sudden they're in Hebron, and they should have been in Jerusalem, and maybe it was a situation where as soon as Absalom says this, they're like, okay, we gotta make a choice here. It's like, go with Absalom or die. Kind of, we don't know. It's just kind of speculating here. While Absalom was offering sacrifices, again, here's David's. Can you remember? I mean, why was Saul kicked out of office for offering sacrifice? Now here's Absalom offering sacrifices because, of course, everything is, he's a great guy, good-looking guy, and he knows how to offer sacrifices. While Absalom was offering sacrifices, he also sent for Ahithophel the Gilonite. This is Bathsheba's grandfather, David's counselor, to come from Gilo, his hometown. And so the conspiracy gained strength, and Absalom's following kept on increasing. So he brings 200 quite innocent men from Jerusalem. Who are they? We don't know. Absalom then calls Ahithophel, who joins the strengthening conspiracy. Okay, so now Absalom is there. He's in Hebron. He's got 200 men. He's got 200 men, and apparently at some point, we don't know when, at some point the trumpets are blown. A messenger came and told David, the hearts of the people of Israel are with Absalom. Okay, now this is our first indication that David has any clue that anything is going on. Now it could be that nobody wants to tell David this, because this is another characteristic of any political leader, that they tend to get surrounded by people who tell him or her what they want to hear. This is why second terms of presidents are never quite as successful as first terms, because the people who are willing to say no or that's wrong to the president tend to fall by the wayside, and second term presidents tend to be surrounded by people who tell them what they want to hear. Okay, but regardless, maybe nobody wants to tell them, but now say, wait a minute, we got messages going out. We got, the one guy with a chariot is out there in Hebron. This is where the kingdom starts. And this is where it started before. Everybody likes David, or everybody likes Solomon, or Absalom. They like Abraham. I should throw Abraham in there too, But they liked him. Okay. Then for the first time in verse 14 here, this is the first time we see David doing this. Then David said to all his officials who were with him in Jerusalem, come, we must flee, or none of us will escape from Absalom. We must leave immediately, or he will move quickly to overtake us and bring ruin on us and put the city to our sword. Now, David's reaction suggests that he does know what's going on. He does know what's at stake. Okay. Now, why the text doesn't give us any indication of what he was up to or why he was trying to put a stop to this, maybe he thought, and it could be one of those things where you know somebody is doing something that's going to result, you're convinced it's going to result in a bad way, and yet you say, okay, I'm not going to interfere. I'm going to just, there's a T-shirt that I want to get that, sometimes it says sometimes you have to sit back, relax, and let the train wreck itself. Okay, but you're doing that. Okay, the train, and maybe he just thought, and all of a sudden it's like, wait, he's not going to do that. He wouldn't do that. He did that, and now David has to respond. Now David is down, but he is not out. Okay, and it's kind of interesting here. The next, David, for the first time in Samuel, tells his followers to flee. Okay. The king's officials answered him, "Your servants are ready to do whatever our lord the king chooses." The king set out with his entire household following, but he left 10 concubines to take care of the palace. Okay. Yeah. Well, we're not done with these 10 concubines. Okay. There's a sad bit about these later on. We're going to come back to these 10 concubines. Okay. But again, there's in this time, the concubines were like the possession of the king, and they were tantamount to his wives. Even though, he had multiple wives, multiple concubines. Okay, and if you remember back, I forget Ishbosheth's. With Ishbosheth, Saul's first son, or the son that became king after Saul, he falls out with Abner because he accuses Abner of sleeping with his concubine. Okay, and so, but they served a role other than just simply being somebody that the king slept with. And he said, "Here you are." He leaves these 10 to take care of the palace. Maybe he doesn't trust Absalom to clean up after himself. I don't know, but he says, these 10, I'm going to leave these 10 concubines here. Take care of the palace, make sure everything, maybe there's children. I don't know. Just leave these 10 concubines here to take care of the palace. So the king set out with all the people following him, and they halted at the edge of the city. Okay. So let's see. So he leaves 10 concubines to care for the palace. Now the next 30 verses or so are just a series of meetings between David and various persons. So David is traveling from Jerusalem to pass the Mount of Olives. Okay, and so he's on this trip, and as he goes on this trip, he meets people. Okay, and so there's a series of conversations that he has, and you see that David is not, again, he's down, but he's not out. He's got ideas. Okay, David, he did not become king by being a dummy. Okay, so he knows some things. So he says first of all, he meets up. All his men marched past him, along with the Kerethites and the Pelethites. And all the 600 Gittites who had accompanied him from Gath marched before the king. Okay, so these are not Jews. These are not Israelites. Okay, these are from Gath. Who else do we know from Gath? Goliath was from Gath. Okay, but David had gone in, had spent some time in the Philistine territory, and he's got these people that are loyal to him. He's got 600. Now, does anybody remember how big David's force was for a lot of his life when he was running from Saul? How many men did he have with him? 600. So David knows he can do a lot of damage with 600 people. Okay, and David knows how to travel with 600 warriors. But the king said to Ittai, the Gittite, "Why should you come along with us? Go back and stay with King Absalom." Okay, notice he says King Absalom, right? Now maybe this, I think, it's my opinion, he's just kind of testing the guy. Go back with King Absalom. Go ahead. You don't need to follow me. The king said, "Okay, you are a foreigner, an exile from your homeland. You came only yesterday, And today I shall make you wander about with us when I do not know where I am going. Go back and take your people with you. May the Lord show you kindness and faithfulness. Okay, just go back. You don't have to, And I think it's a test because then Ittai replies to the king, as surely as the Lord lives, and as my lord the king lives, wherever my lord the king may be, whether it means life or death, there will your servant be. Okay, so I think it's kind of a little test that he's running, and Ittai says, hey, no, 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 no. I'm with my king. You're my king. And where you go, I'm going to go. David said to Ittai, go ahead. Don't let me stop you. Go ahead, march on. Okay. So Ittai the Gittite marched on with all his men and the families that were with him. The whole countryside wept aloud as all the people passed by. The king also crossed the Kidron Valley, and all the people moved on toward the wilderness. So this is now David's turn in the wilderness. Maybe kind of like Israel spent some time in the wilderness. Now David is going to spend some time in the wilderness. Or you could look at it as David's return to the wilderness, because David was kind of put out into the desert when Saul was chasing him. Okay, and this is important because this concept is going to come back up. David has been here before. Okay, David has been traveling. He's been on the run. He's had only 600 men to defend him. So he's been here before. Okay, and he says, so Zadok, the king, also crossed the Kidron Valley, and all the people moved on toward the wilderness. Zadok was there too, and all the Levites who were with him were carrying the Ark of the Covenant of God. They set down the Ark of God in Abiathar, offered sacrifices until all the people had finished leaving the city. Okay, so if you think about it, they're all heading towards the Jordan River, and the Hebron is to the west. So Absalom is coming from this direction, and David and his people are going that direction. And so he's got the Ark. They've got the Ark of the Covenant. Okay, so the priest, David's got the priests. David's got the religious leaders on his side. Okay, but it's interesting that David says to them, the king said to Zag, take the Ark of God back into the city. Because if you remember back, David went to a lot of effort to get the Ark to Jerusalem. And David realizes, again, David has a bigger picture in mind. He says, this is where the Ark belongs. The Ark belongs in Jerusalem. But he says, take the Ark of God. If I find favor in the Lord's eyes, he will bring me back and let me see it in his dwelling place again. But if he says, I am not pleased with you, then I am ready. Let him do to me whatever seems good to him. The king also said to Zadok the priest, okay, now see, David's not done. Okay, he says, do you understand? Go back to the city with my blessing. Take your son Ahimaaz with you, and also Abiathar's son Jonathan. You and Abiathar return with your two sons. I will wait at the fords in the wilderness until word comes from you to inform me. So Zadok and Abiathar took the Ark of God back to Jerusalem and stayed there. David is saying, listen, I need someone on the inside. Okay? And I want you, because, if you think about it, if Absalom is going to become the king, what's the first thing he's going to do once he gets to Jerusalem? He's going to want to go to the priest. He's going to want to go and do some sacrifices. He's going to want to make a big show in the city. And, David wants to know what's going on. Okay? So he says, you two go, and if there's any information, send your two sons. But David continued up to the Mount of Olives, weeping as he went. His head was covered and he was barefoot. All the people with him covered their heads too and were weeping as they went up. So again, he's got a lot to be sorry about. He's lost the kingdom, but again, his family is just, his family. Okay, it's like, family reunions would be great if it didn't have family involved. I'd love reunions. It's the family part. No, kidding. But now David had been told Ahithophel is among the conspirators with Absalom. Now, Ahithophel, again, we haven't heard of this guy before other than being David or Bathsheba's grandfather. And in fact, the text, this is the first time in the text that we've heard of him outside of that family relationship. Okay. But apparently we know immediately he's a really sharp guy. He's a super good advisor. And David knows that. Okay. And Ahithophel is among. So David prayed, Lord, turn Ahithophel's counsel into foolishness. Okay, Lord, and it's interesting here that and what we see here, and I'm going to have to get to the end of this real quick, that even as David is again, he's praying for the Lord and he's working. He's not saying, okay, Lord, you just you know you do it, but he's like, okay, this is the goal, Lord, do this for me, and he's got a plan. And in fact, even as he's praying for this to happen, I think the Lord is providing the answer for him, because it says, uh, so David prayed. When David arrived at the summit where people used to worship God, Hushai the Archite was there to meet him, his robe torn and dust on his head. Who's Hushai? Okay, he's another counselor. Okay, another important counselor, another guy that is advice is good. But he says to Hushai, David said to him, "If you go with me, you will be a burden to me. But if you return to the city and say to Absalom, Your Majesty, I will be your servant. I was your father's servant in the past, but now I will be your servant. Then you can help me by frustrating Ahithophel's advice." So it's like, listen, Hushai, you have a reputation for being a good advisor. Ahithophel has an advice. Your job is, if Ahithophel says go left, you're going to say go right. If Ahithophel says go up, you're going to say go down. If Ahithophel says stop, you're going to say go. If Ahithophel says go, you're going to say stop. Okay? So he's got, the Lord has provided him the, how's this going to happen? How is it going to do it? And then boom, he turns around, there's Hushai. Here's my answer to prayer right there. Okay, so the interesting thing is, again, I don't want to spiritualize the text, but sometimes we have issues here and we pray, and then the answer is right in front of us. Sometimes the Lord just brings someone into your life right away that, okay, here's how am I going to fix this? Here you go. Hushai's going to do this. I'm sure, and it was probably Hushai is there. Hushai's clothes are torn. I mean, he's in mourning. Okay, and he says, and David is like, no, you don't understand. How you're going to help me is not by coming with me. You're going to go back into the lion's den, so to speak. And he does. If you return to the city, and he says, then tell the priest Zadok and Abiathar won't the priest Zadok and Abiathar be there with you? Tell them anything you hear in the king's palace. Their two sons, Ahimaaz, son of Zadok, and Jonathan, son of Abiathar, are there with them. Send them to me with anything you hear. So David has already got a counterinsurgency plan. Now he's sad, he's brokenhearted, he's weeping as he goes. But he's like, you know what? I know what I got to do. I am down, but I am not out here. Okay? And he says, so Hushai, David's confidant, arrived at Jerusalem. So I'm getting there, going one direction. And the way I envision it is Hushai's coming back this way, just as Absalom is entering the city. Okay? So Hushai, David's confidant, arrived at Jerusalem as Absalom was entering the city. All right. Starting next week, we'll get back into talking about some of the others. We're talking about Ziba, who we've met before. Who else? Shimei, who we'll meet again, kind of thing. And then we'll start talking about, so how do Ahithophel and Hushai get along? And how does the Lord bring David back? Any questions? Okay, so I apologize for coughing all through the thing. I don't know what. Just it isn't something. There was somebody was in here one time that, and it's not today. So Rebecca, Silas, don't worry. But somebody came in, had very strong perfume on one day that was in here, and I just was not. I was like, no. So again, it's nobody that's in the room right now. So okay, now we're going to do who has not been here in a while? No. It was only one time. There's only one time this happened, but it was like, man, as soon as I started smelling the perfume, I was like dying. So that's not happening today. I could blame Enrique because he left, kind of thing. So, all right. Well, thank you very much. See you again next week. Do you have a Kleenex?
I was looking for one, and I